Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Tech Talks with Santosh. And today we have a very special guest, William Juan, who is joining us to talk about Angular animation. Thanks a lot for joining us, William.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Santosh.
Yeah. So let me just introduce William. So William is a author ambassador, and he's also an native script ambassador, and he works as a web and mobile developer. So that's what William does, and I have actually had read his blog post. I think it was last year, related to the Angular animation. It was a really nice guide. I think the best guide which is available for Angular animation so far. And then I reached out. We actually got connected, and then I just put the idea about this episode, and he agreed. So here we are talking about Angular animation. Cool.
Thanks,
So
Santosh.
yeah. So let's start with a little bit about animation. Let's not talk about Angular animation in general, but can you just tell us a little bit about animation, what it is, and why it is important?
Yeah, of course. So animations is usually used in both web and mobile apps to show, well, the different kind of things like transitions, motions, and all that. It's usually sometimes also for usability purposes. So sometimes when you click on a button and it doesn't do anything, you don't really know if it actually registered your click or not. So it's not always just adding animations just for fun, but it's sometimes also for usability purposes. So it's a bit of both.
So Angular animation, right? So there is a different module which is altogether available in Angular, and I mean, I'm not an expert in Angular animation, not even animation. So how is that different from the other frameworks or other things which we have? So what it offers?
Yeah, so Angular animations, it's built on top of web animation APIs and CSS animations. So you don't actually get more animatable properties, so properties that you can animate, but it's just an abstraction layer on top of it. I actually have some slides to go over to show
Yeah,
some
sure.
of those.
Share your screen so I can.
Yeah. Do I do that here? Okay.
You have a share option below the screen.
Okay. Yeah, I think I found it. See if I can. Okay. Are you seeing?
Yeah. Let me add it. Yes, now I can.
Okay. Yeah. So I prepared a short deck just to go over some of the animations. Before I start, if we had any other questions.
I think there is one from Jordan. I think it's related to what's the benefits of Angular animation versus CSS? So I tend to learn more CSS, but I heard JS taps into graphics cards compared to CPI, CSS. So.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's a great question. I'm gonna touch on that, and I have some prepared just to answer that question. But to answer it briefly, I think in terms of performance, there's no real difference there, but it's just the way you write it. So Angular animation makes it a little easier to write because it has this. Angular provides you with some of the like enter and leave. Like you get automatically enter and leave transitions without having to add a class and remove a class. So I think it's more of the ease of use over performance.
Oh.
Yeah. So before I start with the Angular animations, I wanted to go over what actual options we have for Angular, because I think even though Angular animations is like the way Angular does animations, we also have other ways that we can use. So there are actually 4 ways that I know of and I've used before, and these are CSS animations, web animation APIs, and some third-party libraries. Then I'll save the best for last. So we'll have a ton to go over for Angular animations. Yeah, just fair warning to everyone. Since this is an animation talk, so I would have demos on a lot of the slides that showcases the various animations. Yeah, just a heads up. Okay, start with CSS animations. So why CSS animations? I think this was also one of the questions. So it's performant because we know it runs on the GPU. And then it's also powerful because you get to animate almost any properties. Like you get performance impacts if you animate some of the properties, but other than that, you have, you basically can animate a lot of the properties that you can think of. And also with that, it comes in also with third-party animation libraries that are pure CSS, so you can automatically use that in an Angular application. So like hover animations, you can do. Does the animation play on your side, Santosh?
Yes, I can see the color, the transition.
Okay, I wasn't sure if those work. Okay, so yeah, you can use CSS transitions to animate properties such as opacity here, where it's just a few lines of code, but you get this nice hover animations. You can also use keyframes, and you use the hover to trigger it. So you also get the power of actually structuring your keyframes here. And this is all done with pure CSS. So whatever you could do in a regular application, you could actually bring that skill to Angular and it would work. And then this is also what I think is where CSS is more appropriate compared to Angular animations is infinite animations, because you just add the class once and then it just runs forever or until you remove that class. So I think this is one of the use cases where I think CSS animations are better compared to Angular. And then also this, so you add a class and then you remove a class to actually animate things. So this particular concept opens up the possibility of using third-party CSS libraries like I mentioned earlier, which uses the same concept of adding and removing classes to trigger animations. So imagine being able to use animate CSS in your Angular app just like this. You have the class animated and fast. Those are predefined classes from animate CSS. And then you just bind your bounce in up and bounce out down to your variables to the Angular way of binding. And you get the add and remove class automatically. So this particular feature, I think, is what makes Angular animations, like animations in Angular, really powerful, because you get to use CSS-based classes and Angular's data binding, and you get this nice mix. So Tailwind also has this animations. It's not as robust as Animate CSS, but it has this nice infinite animations, which you could just add one class and then it'll start animating. So I think these are really nice ways to do animations in a pure CSS way. Let's move on to our second option. We have web animation APIs. So why this? So similar to CSS animations, these are also really performant. And also, since these run on JavaScript, you get the power of JavaScript on top of all the animations. So it gives you control over sequencing and then also the animation states, but also still keeping it very performant. So this one is particularly useful for animations that are based on some dynamic values. So say you want to animate something based on your cursor's position or the element's current position. So you wouldn't be able to do that easily using CSS. But using web animation APIs, you would be able to get a performant animation and also add that dynamic piece in. So I'll go over some like really brief use cases, which I think just introduces what web animation APIs can do. And this code is structured inside an Angular application. So this is what it actually looks like when you run it, when you want to use this code and when you want to use web animation APIs in Angular. So you could chain animations for different elements. So unrelated elements, you could chain them similar to how you do normal promises. So if you see the demo here, you see the boxes, they animate one at a time. It actually waits for the previous one to finish before executing the next. So you get this nice promises to control your animations. You also get to control animation play states. So you get to not only play and stop, but you also get to pause, reverse, and you get all those other fancy additional stuff for that, which I don't think you get easily using other approaches. So third-party libraries. So this one is, I intentionally separated this one from the CSS ones because this one is more involved. So it's not just adding a class. So why third-party libraries? So you don't have to write your own code for animations, which is, well, it can be good or bad. But it's an option. So you can use GreenSock. This is a pretty popular animation library. I think it's used in a lot of those SVGs, especially when you want to animate SVGs. So this is what it looks like when you use this in an Angular application. So you have this timeline. So I think web animation APIs are getting pretty close to what this what GreenSock offers, but it still has some very powerful animation tools that you can use, especially if you're playing with SVGs. And then Lottie, this is Airbnb's animation library. So if you see that car on there, that's actually a Lottie animation. So it's a recorded one, but that's what you could put directly on your application. So what it does is you can export, you can create animation in After Effects, and then you export it as a JSON, and then you can use it in your Angular application through a plugin, and then you'll use it basically similar to just a static SVG or an image. But you get all the controls of an animation. So you could play, pause, start, reverse, and all that. But you can treat it just like a static SVG with those additional features, which I think is really cool. So Angular animations now. So why Angular animations? Like I mentioned earlier, it uses web animation APIs and it falls back to CSS animations. So it is as performant as both. But what I think makes the most difference is it's their ease of use, like how we use their abstraction layer and their out of the box support for the 4 points I mentioned here: enter and leave, and then state change, timing, and also multiple elements. To set this up, it's pretty simple. You just need to make sure your Angular animations dependencies are there in your package.json. So you'll need that, and then just add browser animations module to the imports of your app module, and now you have full access to Angular animations you could use throughout your app. Hi, Lars. So the basic anatomy of Angular animations. So the most basic use cases, the most basic usages usually consist of just five properties. You have the trigger, the state, style, transition, and animate. And those are, I'll go over those in more detail and in actual context of how it's used. But these are what Angular animations are made of. So state change. This is one of the most common use of Angular animations, I think. And this is where, in my opinion, that Angular animations are better than CSS animations. So if you see the HTML towards the bottom right, you can bind the trigger enable state change, and then you just bind it to a string. And then you get automatically the transitions and the animations that we defined above. So when you have, so if you see the second line from on the animations code block, you have the state set as default and then with a style. And then the second set of state is disabled with its own set of style. So what an Angular animation does is when it sees enable state change set to default, it'll apply the style associated with that state. And then same goes for disabled. And then what the transition block does is apply the animation, which it applies the animation to the element when it transitions between the different states. So you get all these in just one block, which I think this is really powerful in my opinion. You can also do enter and leave animations easily with Angular animation. So I think it's pretty common in Angular to use ngIfs to display conditionally. So with Angular animations, you have this special transitions called enter and leave. This gets triggered when the element enters the DOM or gets removed from the DOM. So all you need to do is add the trigger to your element that has the ngIf directive, and you have automatically a transition whenever it enters the DOM and leaves the DOM. So no additional code needed to clean up or set up, no flags and all that. It's just one trigger and then with your ngIf. You could also target children elements with ngIfs and Angular animations. So if you have different animations for your children and you have an ngIf on your parent, you could actually trigger each single one just when the parent enters. So this is something which is which you can't really do easily with either CSS animations or web animation APIs. Because you also mentioned earlier about CSS being able to control keyframes. Angular also lets you do that. It lets you pass in keyframes to their animation. So you could actually move your CSS, your keyframes that are defined in CSS to Angular animations, and it would work. It has a slightly different syntax, but overall you could have keyframes as complex as the ones you have in CSS, and it would still work on Angular animations. This is also another one that I think where Angular excels in is staggering. So staggering is when you add a delay between the execution of your animations. So if you see the boxes here, it has a 100 millisecond delay between the execution of each one. So you have this cascading effect. So what Angular needs you to do here is just, instead of passing in the animate function directly, you pass the animate function inside a stagger function and then pass in the delay. So you get this nice effect with just one additional function call. So I think I'm getting towards the end of the Angular animations part. So disabling animation, this is usually, so whenever you add animations, there's usually always a need to be able to disable the animations. And the need to disable it might be different for for various reasons. So you could disable a section of your application animation by using this. This is the .disabled. This is a special directive that Angular provides. So when you add this to a element, it disables everything, all the animations within that, so all its children, without affecting its parents or sibling. So if you add this on your root level, it would actually disable your entire app. But you could also apply it to a specific part, and you could disable parts of it. So the second method, you could use the new animations module. So instead of passing in browser's animation module, you pass in this module, and it would skip all your animations. This is not configurable at runtime, so this is usually mostly used for testing. So when you want to run a lot of tests and your UI has a lot of animations, you don't want your test to actually wait for your animations to be done. So this skips the entire animation. And then an interesting one, this one just came out with version 12. So it actually lets you pass a config to your browser's animation module to disable it at runtime. So this is pretty cool because you could, so like this example here, you could hook into a listener to prefers reduced motion. So if your users have that setting turned on, your app automatically turns off animation for you. So I think this particular new one is pretty powerful for that particular use case where you can disable everything just through a config.
Right.
So now that we know what Angular Animations is and how we use it, so is it only limited to web? So actually it's not. So you could also use it in a hybrid app. So like in an Ionic app, you import the exact same browser's animation module and it will work. So whatever we did for like enter leaves, state change, stagger, all that, those would work the exact same way in an Ionic app. So Ionic is still a web-based hybrid framework. You could even take it further to a NativeScript app. So it would even work with NativeScript. So the only difference here is instead of importing the browser's animation module, you import NativeScript animations module. But everything still works the same way. So enter and leave, state change, all that still works. So I think where this becomes really useful is when you have a code sharing workspace. So if say you have NX or any code sharing project, not only can you share your business logic or your CSS styles, but you could also share Angular animations code. So write animations code once, and you would be able to use that basically in your web application, your mobile application.
Nice.
Yeah, quick recap on what we did, what we went through. The CSS animations, we had various different options with CSS, pure CSS and third party. And then we have the web animation APIs too. And then the third-party animation libraries, stuff that you just drop in the plugin and then use external tools, and you have animated stuff on your project. And then of course Angular Animations and its core features and integrations. Yeah, that's all I have.
Yeah, so let's take a question from Raghavan. So his question is, all these visual effects are within the browser, a CSS trick, or any server-side rendering takes place here?
Oh, in what I just showed?
Yes.
Oh, those are just slides. I recorded the animations I did in Angular, and then I just put them in slides because I wasn't confident enough that my stuff would run on a live stream. So yeah, those are all recorded, but those are real animations that are recorded.
That's how it will look like in the browser, right?
Right. Yes. Yeah. Those are recorded directly from the browser.
Awesome. So yep, let's take another question which we had from Twitter. So Does adding more animation affect the application performance? I think many developers have this question. Adding once you add the animation, it starts performing or lagging. So what you suggest in terms of what we can do to improve the performance, and does it really affect?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think it does affect animations. Yeah, I mean, animations does affect performance if not used correctly.
Mm-hmm.
So the browser has these 4 steps. I think it's style, layout, paint, and then I don't remember what the last one is. So
Mm-hmm.
the further up that list is the more expensive it is to animate. So if you animate, say, margin or padding, that's going to be costly to you. So you'd have a performance impact. And then if I think layout would be height and width, so that would still have a performance impact, but not as bad as margin. And then the next one are translates and then colors. So
Mm-hmm.
I think the key is to animate those that are lower down the list. I can link that later to you, send the link to you, Santosh. But you want to animate opacity, translates, scales, rotations, anything that doesn't affect everything else. So like if you animate one element and it doesn't shift anything else on the UI, that should be fine. But if you animate one element and everything else shifts, that's going to give you a performance impact.
Because there will be a repaint again. So
Right.
once the shift layout,
Right.
this
Right.
once
Yeah.
so.
Yeah. Every repaint recalculation, that's going to be costly.
Yeah.
So you want to minimize that, and you should be fine.
Yeah. So
Hey,
let's
Alex.
check. And there is another question from Jordan. Yeah. How do you get animation to end?
So that kind of depends on what you use it to start, right? If it's CSS animations, then you could just remove the class and it'll stop. If it's Angular animations, yeah, depending on what the condition is to start it, I think you would use the same one to stop it. I don't know if that answered your question, Jordan.
So these are 4 steps he just mentioned. So
Yes.
animation, style, DOM, and repaint.
Yep. So you want it to be lower down that list.
Okay. So if I'm, let's say, okay, if I'm just doing DOM manipulation, that will be costly, if I'm not wrong. It will be right. So anime as per the sequence.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, like what I said earlier, when you have less other elements that get impacted. So if you shift the margin, everything else shifts, right? But if you just change the color, nothing else in the UI changes. So I think you want to think of it as when you animate one thing, you want only that thing to be animated and not anything else to be affected.
Oh, got it. Cool. So there is Angular animation. I found some browser doesn't clear it down. He's talking about removing the animation. So probably you faced anything similar to this?
I don't think I've actually personally ran into Angular animation doesn't stop, but there might be a use case that I just haven't run into yet.
Probably, yeah. Probably, Jordan, you can connect with William on Twitter and see.
Yeah, I would be curious to know what that is too.
So Ginu has this question: anything new in Angular 12 related to animation? I think we already spoke about the way to actually remove animation based on user preference. But anything else apart from that?
Yeah, I think this is the major one. At least this was the one that I actually found out was the way to disable animations at runtime via config instead of the disabled flag.
Cool. Yeah. So Serkan has this question: is there something similar for framer motion when not? Are you interested in something like that, or not necessary because Angular animation is good enough?
Yeah, I think that's. How do I answer that? Because I've seen framer motion, but I haven't actually used it. So I think like React's reanimated, like those are also really powerful animation libraries, which I don't think exist currently for Angular, but I'm not sure what the reason is for that, because those other frameworks don't come in with an animation module similar to what Angular offers. So it's possible that Angular's animation module is almost on par with these, or it's just missing a couple of things that we could add easily with third-party libraries. But I would be interested to seeing, or maybe I just haven't seen it yet, but having something like Framer Motion or Reanimated for Angular.
So Jordan has actually, okay, so he says you just need to look at the event loop. I think this is where the problem is.
Okay.
So Jordan has, no, so Serkan has this, I think he just rewrote his question. Do you think Angular animation is good and we do not need Framer Motion? So I think he just just rewrote his question earlier. I think it was confusing.
So I think Angular animation is good, but I also think Framer Motion is good. So I think more options is always good. So
exactly.
if we do have Angular animations and Framer Motions, and we as the developers get to choose, then I think that would be best. But yeah, I think it's equally good at what it does. But I can't speak a lot to Framer Motion because I haven't actually used it a lot.
Good. So in case there is any other questions, we can take those. Otherwise, let me just ask another question. So it happens often, right? So you get into some issues. Your animation is actually should run in 60 frames per second as per the browsers, but it takes time. So any tips how to figure those out or how to resolve those issues in case someone gets into that?
Yeah, I think if I remember correctly, I actually had that section in the Angular in-depth post just for performance. So I think a few key things are those 4 steps. You want it to be furthest from the styles and layouts. So like I said earlier, you want the only thing that changes is the one that's affected and not any other thing. And then, yeah, I think if you use CSS animations or web animation APIs, and you're not animating any properties that tend to be costly, I think you should be good to always hit that 60 frames per second. Usually when it starts dropping frames, it's usually always when you're doing too much calculation or too much repaint where the layout shifts too much at a given time. So I think if you avoid all that, you should be almost always hitting 60 FPS.
Oh, cool. Because I've seen a lot of time developers adding set timeout in their code and then it actually drops when you transit.
Yeah. Sometimes also you want to make sure that nothing else is running when you're running your animation code, so it doesn't actually conflict. I also usually run into where when you animate your parent component, like where it has a bunch of children, and your children's also animating. So that usually that parent and children animating at the same time, that usually causes problem too. So I think you might want to avoid those kind of things and actually animating like large parts of the UI.
So Raghavan has this question: can we dynamically control or toggle the animation state depending on the network speed? I think it's the same. So you can see disabling animation. I think that's the answer.
Yeah, that's right.
So probably someone can just write in small library, right?
Right.
So based on network speed, disable the animation. Great idea for a library. So whoever is listening and interested to contribute to open source, just go ahead and check. There is already a code, I think, which is related to. There is, if you remember, there is a library for Angular lazy loading, which actually downloads the your lazy chunks based on the network speed. I think we can just copy the code from there and put it inside this, and it's ready. Just an idea.
Yeah, I think that would actually work. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So browsers only tend to render. Yeah. Agreed. So as Jordan also says, so it's set timeout and event queue, which causes a lot of issues because I am struggling right now in one of the application. There are a lot of frame drops I was able to reduce, but still there are just due to set timeout. So in case you're listening, you have animation, try to avoid using set timeout. It blocks the main thread and your animation will probably will be really bad and your users will just complain about it.
Yeah, yeah, that's true.
So request animation frame, parent, and then request. Okay, so he's nesting. This is what he's talking about.
Mm. Yeah, I haven't actually nested stuff that way. I've done it
Uh-huh.
a different way, but it has. I think it should have like a similar effect, if I'm not mistaken.
Ah, cool. Great. So I don't think so. There are any questions on chat right now. So next question for you, William. So is there anything you want to promote on the channel?
Um, not nothing really. I have a couple animation related pieces that I'm working on right now, which I
Okay.
think would be complementary to what I just covered. So I have one in work that are for actual use cases, so like real world use case of animations for Odd Zero. So be on the lookout for that. I'm also just starting a new YouTube channel where I'm gonna. I think I'm gonna go over animation stuff. So like doing animations for both web and mobile. So
Wow,
stay tuned for that
that's
too.
really great. I think it will really help a lot of developers. But because I have not seen, to be frank, I mean in 3 years, or it's close to 4 years now. I'm working with Angular. I have not seen people talking a lot about Angular animation. So I think that will be a great success for sure. We are looking forward to actually. So whenever you do, just let me know. We will also share within the network. I think it will be worth subscribing for.
Yeah, thanks, Santosh. Yeah, I think animations is covered a lot more in other frameworks compared to Angular.
Yeah, actually, and
Yeah.
but I have heard. I mean, the blog post which you wrote, right? So I read it, and then I realized, okay, the Angular animation is really powerful, but I'm not sure why it is not promoted in that way.
Yeah,
So
I feel like I feel like Angular is such a serious framework where you still get to add animations to it, but
yeah,
it's more targeted as like a serious framework compared to yeah. But I think more like Sarkhan said, like if we have more animations library, the more options, the better, right?
yeah. So I think there is another question. That's all I know about animation. Yeah, Nirali has this question: how to implement animate on scroll independent of any library? So
Uh,
what you you want to have scroll animation?
Yeah, I think so. So right now, like at this right now, I think there is a new CSS property that lets you animate on scroll. I think it's still experimental, but I think once that lands on major browsers, I think you would be able to control scroll animations directly from CSS. So this is not specific to Angular, but you would be able to do it just using pure CSS. I think this would work similar to like how position sticky works. Like you have to use JavaScript, and then now it just got replaced with CSS. I think this is going to work in a similar way. Yeah, animations, animating on scroll. I think that's coming in CSS like pretty
Oh,
soon.
wow, that's nice. So, okay, Raghavan says, can we dynamically control toggle the animation? So that's what Raghavan. So you can do it with the API which is on the screen. So you can see there is an API called browser animation module.with and then you can pass the config based on your network speed. And for that, you can just refer the code which we discuss about. So there is a module which already exists related to downloading the lazy chunks based on network speed. Probably you can refer the same code and write your own function. So Jordan says, do you think Angular animation not promoted as much because of accessibility?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't really know what the answer to that is because I'm not really into accessibility. Like I don't know enough about that and how it ties in with animations.
Maybe.
Yeah, what do you think, Santosh?
And as I said, right, so I have hardly used animation. I'm actually a noob if it comes to animation. I generally depend upon the people who are really good at CSS. So I just tell them, okay, anyways, you will be able to do it faster than me. So take it. That's what I do. So yeah, but I love to actually see the contents where people talk about animation, especially your tweets where you talk about. Recently, you tweeted about one. I think it was related to native script, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, the last tweet you shared. But yeah, I mean, I love the animation, but I have not actually explored that much. But I think I will explore it. So that's it. I think we don't have much questions. In case you have any questions, further questions, and you want to get in touch with William, so you can just refer his Twitter handle, William Juan 27, and you can just ping him for questions. Hope that's fine, William.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm always happy to connect with the community.
And yeah, so I'll also update the blog post which he wrote about the animation, which is really great content in case you want to start learning about Angular animation rather than doc. I will suggest go to his blog post, which is much detailed and in written in a better way with examples. So that's we'll add that into description. And yeah, that's it. That's it for the day. Thanks a lot for your time, William, and thanks a lot for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Santosh.
Yeah, Raghavan. Yeah, bye everyone, and see you next week. So, so Alex has this question: do you have YouTube channel too? But I think you said you are working on it, right?
Yeah,
Do you
I
have?
just launched it. I think yesterday.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Sure. Just share the link, please.
yeah. How do I share links to you?
Yep. You can just go to private chat, or just if you are not able to, are you not able to post anything inside comments directly?
I don't think I can. Yeah.
Okay. Probably okay. I have to check, but just ping me in the private chat.
Okay. Yeah, I can.
I'll just. Yeah. I'm so really sorry. I thought you are working on it and you will be launching it soon. I was not aware that you already did.
Yeah, I just recently launched it, so it only has one video right now.
Cool. This is where it starts, right?
Right.
So yeah, this is the YouTube channel in the chat, and let's make it 100 so he can actually add unique name, the channel name. So I'll tweet about it as well so people can subscribe to this. But looking forward to many more contents related to animation.
Yeah. Thanks, Santosh.
Yeah. So cool, everyone. Now it's time. So we will meet again next Friday, and next Friday we are going to discuss about Microsoft Azure. So we'll be talking about the different services which it has, and what can be useful to us, and how to get started with Microsoft Azure. So in case you are interested, you can join us next Friday 10 p.m. IST, and the guest is Srishti Jain, who is a Google developer expert and Microsoft Valued professional, and she'll be joining us. Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.